Good morning, everybody. Welcome to session 5, which is the last in our current series of CarbonNet online community information sessions. Today is hydrogen and CCS, but before we get into it, I would like to acknowledge that today I come to you from the traditional land of the Braikalong people of the Gunai Nation and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and also pay my respects to those elders whose land you are coming from today. And I think we do have people coming from many places, both from across our country and from even internationally. So look, thanks so much for joining us. These have been a great way to give some updates and have some discussion on the CarbonNet project. And this morning, I will be welcoming Dr. Patrick Hartley, who's the Hydrogen Mission Lead at CSIRO. Before I do throw to Patrick, I'll just give you a very brief introduction of the CarbonNet project for those of you who haven't managed to attend the other sessions. So the CarbonNet project, or CCS, is being investigated in Victoria and implemented around the world because it is recognised as a key climate change mitigation strategy that can help us achieve net zero emissions by 2050. The CarbonNet project itself is working towards establishing a CCS hub in Gippsland that will transport captured carbon dioxide from industry via a pipeline and store it deep below the seabed in Bass Strait. And the CO2 will be injected into porous rock, replicating the way oil and gas have been stored naturally for millions of years and how our gas reserves are currently safely stored to meet peak demand. And from those of you who joined us for Nick Hoffman's presentation last week, you would have had a very detailed discussion around why the geology in the Bass Strait lends itself to this activity. And if you weren't able to join that, then you can jump online because the recordings are sitting up online. Look, Gippsland does offer a world-class opportunity for CCS, and the project to date has successfully completed a number of offshore investigations that clearly indicate the Gippsland Basin geology has excellent potential to safely store large quantities of CO2. And of course, it's located in a great proximity close to the industrial base in the Latrobe Valley or new industries. The project and the new industries it enables will also provide substantial job opportunities in Gippsland through a construction phase, looking at around 2026 to 2030 for the construction, with an operational phase providing long-term employment from 2030. Successful implementation of this project will lead to a commercial scale carbon transportation and storage system, safeguarding existing jobs, introducing new industries such as hydrogen, along with employment opportunities to the Latrobe Valley. I think talking about CarbonNet and the linkage to new industries such as hydrogen is a great segue into today's speaker, who is Patrick Hartley. For any of you who have been around the hydrogen space for a period, you will know Patrick's name very well, and you may have been lucky enough to hear him present in the past. Patrick's current role, he's the leader of the CSIRO Hydrogen Industry Mission, and his role includes developing the strategy, structure, operating model and partnerships which underpin a major new national research initiative which is focused on delivering research, development and demonstrations which enable a scale up of Australia's domestic and export hydrogen industries. Patrick is responsible for establishing CSIRO's Hydrogen Energy Systems Future Science Platform in 2018, and this major initiative focuses on addressing research challenges which underpin the development of hydrogen energy value chains in Australia. During this time, he co-led the formulation of CSIRO's National Hydrogen Roadmap, and with the Chief Scientist of Australia, Dr. Alan Finkel, the briefing paper Hydrogen for Australia's Future, which was presented to the Council of Australian Governments, which is COAG Energy Council in 2018. Patrick knows, I'm not going to say every single thing there is to know about hydrogen because that will mean someone will ask a question you'll have to take on notice. But look, we are really blessed. We're really lucky to have Patrick join us for this last presentation. And without any further ado, I will hand over to Patrick to deliver us his presentation. Welcome, Patrick, and thanks for making time to be with us.
Thank you very much, Jane. Thanks for the introduction. Yes, a lot of bits and pieces to my work in hydrogen there. That's that's great. So it's great to be with you here today to talk a little bit about what hydrogen means, really, and also what we're doing in our missions initiative in CSIRO, which was actually just launched just in May formally, although we've been working it up for quite some time. So I might just I presume everyone can hear me okay, and I'm going to try and share my screen now. So if I can get a thumbs up when that's happening. All good? Yep, excellent. Okay, great. I'll just move that out of the way so you can see that. There we go. All right. So great to be with you here today. I guess what I thought I'd do is cover two things really. Try and cover in a fairly basic way what hydrogen's all about and why it's of great interest right across Australia at the moment. And then I'll focus in the second half of the presentation really on what we're doing in our mission and some of the initiatives that we're undertaking through that. So I'll start very much with a grounding slide on what hydrogen is. So hydrogen, everyone's heard of it now, and probably this is well-known content for most people. But anyway, hydrogen is the lightest and most abundant element on Earth. And it's a very interesting compound, but the trouble is it only exists, or molecule I should say, the trouble is it only exists on Earth when it's in compounds with other elements, and those other elements might be things like oxygen. Oxygen, when reacted with hydrogen, is water, H2O, or when it's in compounds with things like carbon, you get fossil fuels like methane, natural gas. So that's CH4. So you can see both of those molecules have quite a lot of hydrogen in them. So both of them are actually very good carriers for hydrogen. But importantly, that's where hydrogen comes from. We have to extract hydrogen from those molecules and many other molecules for that matter, in order to use it as an energy carrier on its own. And to do that, we need to use energy. So energy is really needed to crack those molecules to extract hydrogen in its molecular form, H2, from water and those other chemical compounds. Most importantly, hydrogen stores the energy that you use to crack it out. So in doing those reactions, you put energy in, the hydrogen stores the energy, and then you can actually release that energy from hydrogen when you burn it in oxygen or when you use it in chemical reactions. And the key thing here is that when you extract that energy from hydrogen, the only product is water. So if you're using hydrogen to react with water, you're producing energy, and so the energy carrier, hydrogen, produces zero greenhouse gas emissions at point of use. There's no carbon dioxide formed from that reaction. You just get energy and water when you react hydrogen with oxygen, and that's really the basis for why hydrogen is really looked at now as a zero emissions energy carrier in a lot of applications. Also very important to realise that hydrogen is not a new compound, a new molecule. It's already used extensively in many major industries, in things like producing ammonia for fertiliser. It's used in the semiconductor industry, and it's used a lot in petroleum refining. And there's around about 80 million tonnes of hydrogen produced industrially every year at the moment. But that's going to change a lot if we're going to start using hydrogen much more broadly in our energy systems. And so just a quick diversion here to look at what emissions look like in Australia. This is fairly recent studies from our federal government, which looks at where the sectors which produce carbon dioxide are. And most people probably think mostly, really quite often only, about electricity as the main source of emissions in our energy system. But you can see from this graph, there are many other sectors which produce significant amounts of carbon dioxide emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. And so really decarbonising all of these sectors is the challenge that we're going to undertake if we're going to achieve the net zero emissions target that many countries, including Australia, are moving towards. And so it's not just about electricity, it's about transport, You can see there transport 18% of emissions, and other energy sources around 20, and then smaller contributions, but significant contributions from things like agriculture as well. So what hydrogen really gives you is an opportunity to look at how you can reduce emissions using a different carrier in many of those industrial applications, those applications I just showed you there. So you can really use hydrogen in many different sectors, and this idea that hydrogen can be used to couple those sectors together through a single energy carrier using it in industrial processes, in transport, to decarbonize gas networks, to actually put hydrogen into our existing gas networks, to reduce the emissions from natural gas. And ultimately, I guess the application that you've heard about, and the big focus of the project in Gippsland, is the use of hydrogen as a really game-changing way of moving clean energy around the world. At the moment, we move a lot of fossil fuels, coal and natural gas around the world. But as we move into the future, there is the opportunity that hydrogen can actually become a completely new form of energy export, and one that doesn't create emissions when it's used. And that's of great interest in many countries, including Japan, which is of course a major partner in the HESC project. And I should also say those sort of highlighted sectors there are where hydrogen has a direct potential use. But of course, if you transition your industry in those areas using hydrogen, there are opportunities in other things like manufacturing, in our services industry, and of course in my industry, which is research and development. And so all of these industries actually stand to benefit from the opportunity of transitioning to hydrogen energy systems. So why do we care about it in Australia? Well, the answer is because we have tremendous amounts of energy, and we all know we have tremendous amounts of fossil fuels in the forms of natural gas and of course brown coal and coal in the Trove Valley, and so we have, relatively speaking, a small demand for energy in our own country, and so we have this potential to harness that energy in a new way to produce hydrogen. And as I mentioned previously, the fact that we can, in essence, produce more clean energy than we need is of great interest to some of our international partners for decarbonising their own energy systems through importing hydrogen. And of course, we have the ability to transition, as I mentioned, many of our own domestic industrial uses and energy uses using hydrogen. And so these graphs basically just show you the sheer opportunity, really. On the left-hand side, the amount of renewable energy, those dark green zones, huge areas of Australia which could be used for producing hydrogen, well, renewable energy and hydrogen. And on the right-hand side, all of our energy basins there, where we can potentially produce hydrogen from fossil fuels, and particularly use carbon capture and storage to mitigate the CO2 emissions. So why now? Well, I think many people will know that hydrogen has been of interest for many years, but things have changed more recently, and that's for reasons such as the global move towards net zero emissions, which we're hearing a lot about now, through really sort of I guess signalled most clearly through the Paris Climate Agreement. We're also the technology for producing hydrogen and using hydrogen is actually at a much higher level of technological maturity now. So essentially it's commercial. So previously it was the domain of research and technology developers to look at these technologies. Now they're very much commercially ready and being used globally. Very importantly, things like the cost of energy, renewable energy, have dropped dramatically. Which means that you can actually use now renewable energy quite economically as a feedstock for hydrogen production. And then finally, as I mentioned, we have the emergence of these overseas markets, and I've shown you there Japan and Korea, but there are now many more, even in Europe, looking at importing hydrogen. And so the Australian government and Australian industry is very engaged now in discussions with many of those countries to look at how we can partner to make this industry a reality. So this is work that goes back quite a long way now. It was done in 2018, where we CSIRO charted the opportunity for Australia and looked at the different applications where hydrogen can be used, and tried to figure out where we felt the lowest hanging fruit were for hydrogen in Australia were. And you can see on the top left of that graph, you can see applications in transport in particularly, which are already quite cost competitive in that green zone, already quite cost competitive for using hydrogen to displace things like diesel and petrol, and so that's quite a core focus area right now for many organisations, including our own, looking at how we can implement hydrogen in the transport sector. And most importantly, I guess all of these applications, you can see the closeness to that blue line, which is what we anticipated back in 2018 the cost of green hydrogen production would be. You can see those applications are pretty close. So if we can get those applications down, we'll get the cost of hydrogen down to that region where the applications are on the same line, the same cost. Then we can really look at using hydrogen to decarbonise all those different applications. And you've probably heard about the famous H2 under 2 catchphrase. Well, that's actually what it means. So that dotted line there, which I've just showed you, is the price for hydrogen production at around $2 a kilo. And so you can see if we can get the cost of hydrogen down to that level, which is a bit below where we thought we could get to in 2018. It is a stretch target to get there, but it's a target that's certainly achievable if things work out. Then, as I say, all of these other applications really come into play for using hydrogen in industry, in our electricity systems, and as a chemical feedstock for many different applications. Because of the opportunity that we and many others identified, the Council of Australian Governments, as Jane mentioned, we work with the Chief Scientist of Australia to really brief that Council of Australian Governments, their Energy Council, on what the opportunity looked like, and that led to them committing to develop a national hydrogen strategy, which was done in close consultation with industry and the community. And since then, you've seen the development of strategies right across the country. So now all of our state governments and territory governments actually have either a completely distinct hydrogen strategy or have it built into their hydrogen strategies moving forward. And there's been work both through the national strategy, which was adopted by everybody, all those governments in 2019. And you're now seeing funding commitments flowing both at the state level and the territory level, and increasingly at the federal level as well, through things like the Low Emission Technology Statement, which was released towards the end of last year, and had really some quite significant funding commitments around hydrogen and other low emissions technologies. So let's just look at where we're getting our hydrogen from very quickly, just to indicate what those different forms of hydrogen are. So as I've mentioned, we can get hydrogen from fossil fuels, and that can be coal or natural gas. Here I've shown you a natural gas example, a little bit of chemistry there, just showing you how you produce hydrogen from natural gas. You react it with water in what's called a thermochemical process, and that thermochemical process produces carbon dioxide as well as a significant amount of hydrogen. And that process, along with the analogous, I guess, coal-based process called gasification, is pretty much responsible for the vast majority of hydrogen production globally, and that's done in these large-scale commercial plants that you can see there pictured. That's a steam methane reforming plant, so you can see a sort of an industrial piece of infrastructure. Of course, you have an example of a gasification plant right there in the Latrobe Valley at the Loy Yang plant, which is the basis of the HESC project. Slightly smaller scale than the one I pictured to you there, but still a significant piece of industrial infrastructure. There is increasing and great interest now in the green pathway for making hydrogen, which uses electricity to split water from hydrogen into hydrogen and oxygen. So you can see there, as I mentioned, no emissions of carbon dioxide. And that's already done at commercial scale in many places around the world for specific applications. And you can see a reasonably large scale electrolyzer there pictured as well. So that's an opportunity as electricity costs come down, as we deploy more renewable energy, renewable electricity generation. There's a great interest in using, I guess, the excess electricity that we don't need for other applications to produce hydrogen, both for storing and also ideally for exporting as we move into scaling that up. Many of you will have heard of the different colours of hydrogen, and those colours really refer to how they're produced. So starting with brown hydrogen, which is hydrogen essentially extracted from coal using gasification, and when you don't abate that CO2 using things like carbon capture and storage, that's called brown hydrogen. If you do the same thing with natural gas, again, you don't use carbon capture and storage to abate it. It's known as black and grey hydrogen. The analogous examples for using clean hydrogen are blue hydrogen, where you're using fossil fuels in combination with carbon capture and storage to abate those CO2 emissions, and of course green hydrogen, as I mentioned, where you're using essentially green electricity to produce hydrogen without any CO2 emissions. So that's also known as renewable hydrogen. There are many other colours of hydrogen. People even talk about using nuclear power in places like France to produce hydrogen directly, also using water or directly from the nuclear process, and many other versions too. So quite a few different colours of hydrogen, but the ones you hear most often are probably the brown and grey and blue and green there. So I guess the biggest, most significant project, which we're all probably familiar with in blue hydrogen right now, which is currently operating, is the Hydrogen Energy Supply Chain project in the Latrobe Valley there. And so that is a blue hydrogen project where the partners in the project are taking the brown coal resource in the Latrobe Valley and using that to produce hydrogen via the process of gasification. And the idea is that's a small scale project, so the emissions of that project from that process aren't abated right now because it's very much in the pilot scale. But as we move forward, and that project hopefully goes to commercial scale within the next decade, the intent, of course, is to take that carbon dioxide from that project and sequester it using the carbon net CO2 storage site, which is of course relatively close by to the Latrobe Valley, and of course it really is blue hydrogen at scale. And of course, major project developments also on how we're going to export that hydrogen once it's produced, with a project part of the project being located in Hastings, at the Port of Hastings, where the hydrogen is being liquefied, so put into liquid form and then transferred onto the liquid hydrogen carrier, which has been built in Japan for delivery to hydrogen. And I think that actual demonstration of the shipping aspect will be happening very soon, as I understand it. On the green hydrogen side, there are also fairly significant developments happening now. So we're starting to see fairly large-scale projects based on that electrolysis pathway for producing hydrogen. So three major project announcements going back to May, just in May this year. So the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, ARENA, providing significant funding there of the order of $30 to $40 million per project. To various proponents, three main proponents, one of which is actually in Victoria, in Wodonga, where they are planning to install a fairly large-scale 10 megawatt electrolyser at a wastewater treatment facility, where the oxygen will be used in the wastewater process, and the hydrogen will actually be used to introduce into gas networks in the area. So we're starting to decarbonise the gas networks in Albury and Wodonga, and so those have really just been announced. So the work to really build those is only just getting going. And two other projects there that you can see in Western Australia. One, again, another natural gas network-based project, and a project where hydrogen will be used as an industrial feedstock in the production of ammonia by the Yarra company in the Pilbara, which already produces ammonia for fertiliser applications. And so this is actually that's just a few of the very many projects that are going on around Australia, and this is actually a summary which is probably a little bit out of date now, but you can see really demonstration projects activities going right around the country, covering all of those sectors of hydrogen application that I mentioned: gas networks, mobility, so that's using it in transport, industrial processes, and of course export. And so a couple of two major projects which have been proposed. One, which is the HES project, which is currently operating as a pilot scale, and a proposal in northwestern Australia to actually export hydrogen based on ammonia produced from renewable energy as well. If you're interested to know more about the projects that are going on across Australia, we've launched a resource which I'll speak about shortly as part of our mission. It's called High Resource. You can see the web link there on the bottom left of the slide, and that's a pretty comprehensive listing of all of the projects and where they're at across Australia at the moment. So feel free to jump onto that resource and have a look at what's going on and who the companies are that are doing it. So yeah, that's worth a look. On to now to the hydrogen industry mission. So this is our latest sort of fairly major initiative that was, as I mentioned, was just announced formally launched in May this year. And so this is very much CSIRO getting right behind the development of this industry and really getting behind that national hydrogen strategy goal of getting hydrogen to under $2 a kilogram. The way we're doing that is through our mission pillars. You can see them there, the Hydrogen Knowledge Centre, and that High Resource is an example of that. We are helping inform government and industry through feasibility and strategy studies, like our National Hydrogen Roadmap, which I'll talk about in a moment. We are actively developing now demonstration projects, both our own demonstration projects, but supporting demonstration projects like the HES project in Victoria. And of course, delivering the enabling science and technology, which we've always done, particularly behind new technology and other science that helps reduce the barriers to this industry development. And you can see some, but by all means not all, of our partners in the mission down there along the bottom of the slide. And yes, we were launched, as I say, in May this year. So I mentioned there High Resource. High Resource is the first of the modules of our Hydrogen Knowledge Centre. That was developed in partnership with the Future Fuels CRC, with our Industry Growth Centre, NERA, and the Australian Hydrogen Council, which is the main, I guess, industry association in hydrogen right now. So very much a collaborative effort between our organisations to I guess portray, to promote what's going on in the industry. And very actively maintained. We have more or less a full-time resource helping us put that together, so keeping a very close eye on industry development. So really an up-to-date place to go and find out what's going on in Australia in hydrogen. And this is just an extract from some of that recent extract from that work, just to show you where all these projects are in Australia at the moment. So you can see in the different states quite a few projects. Most of them are under development, so it's still fairly early days for the industry. Some are actually operating, and everything in between, I guess. But you can see that it's still there's a lot of work on the drawing board, a lot of work going on the planning of these projects. And so in the next few years, we're really going to see quite an explosion in the number of projects that are operating in many of those areas I spoke about. In our second area of feasibility studies and strategy, really this builds on work that we've done over the last few years in informing government, informing the research community, and informing industry about the opportunities for hydrogen, and now moving much more into really trying to understand what has to happen over the next decade for many of these applications to be realised, and that includes working with our federal government on many of their policy developments as well. For our own projects, we're really focusing quite a lot now on demonstration projects, as I mentioned. This is an example of a demonstration project that we're just undertaking right now. So we're establishing a technology demonstration facility at our plant in Clayton in Victoria, and we will be using that to install new hydrogen technologies that we're developing, but also which our partners are developing. We've just taken delivery of the first lease of a Toyota Mirai Generation 2 vehicle. We were lucky enough to be the first to take on that lease from Toyota, also based in Altona, and we'll be using that to demonstrate hydrogen transport between our site in Clayton and Melbourne and our site down in Geelong, at the Warm Ponds campus down there. And ultimately, we will be using that to we'll actually be refueling that vehicle and doing demonstrations with other partners of hydrogen technologies through our partnership with Swinburne University, which was announced in February. So this is very much a new hub initiative supported by the Victorian Government Department of Education to I guess to build research, build training, and build this infrastructure of the hydrogen refueler. Which we will be using to demonstrate many of those technologies moving forward. So that's an exciting new development. So watch this space on that as well. In summary, I guess you can see hopefully that investment in these pre-commercial scale hydrogen demonstration projects is ramping up. Many projects in development, and absolutely important to say that both state and federal governments are really supporting those projects to a great degree, and helping industry bridge those financial gaps in the economics of those projects, which obviously need to be brought down in order to really make this technology commercial. Focus now is on that cost reduction through commercial scale up. So scale up is a key way of reducing those costs, so realizing those economies of scale, and in production, but most importantly, perhaps in many ways in using that hydrogen now. So developing new use cases for hydrogen is really required in order to demonstrate, in order to build the demand that will support the use, support the production of hydrogen at scale. And I guess one of the interesting things is that the hydrogen injection to gas networks has been a real focus for that particular industry, and has perhaps developed more rapidly than we expected in Australia, given the support of that industry in particular. But we do expect to see transportation applications, especially heavy transport applications, to develop quite significantly within the next 5 years. So I will leave it there and hand back to Jane, I think, for questions. Thanks very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Patrick. It is absolutely a whirlwind of activity, and it really is a full-time job just keeping up with it all. I found that really, super interesting, and it's just great to hear it straight from a person who spends his days thinking, talking, working in this space. So that was a fantastic presentation. I think we have got a couple of questions. Amanda, would you like to read out the first question?
Sure. We have a couple of questions here that are based around water. The first one is how much water, recycled, fresh or sea, would be required for the production of hydrogen from brown coal, and how many litres of water per tonne of brown coal or kilo of hydrogen? I'm not sure if that's going to roll off your tongue there, Patrick, or Jane.
You're right, Amanda. It's I mean, I can give you the answer. The theoretical limit, I guess, for producing hydrogen from electrolysis of water, so just producing hydrogen from water, is around about 9 kilos per kilo of hydrogen. And I guess from what I can remember, and I'd have to go back and check the numbers, but it's not actually that dissimilar for what you use in the brown coal process as well. A lot of those fossil fuel processes, not many people realise they're kind of using the fossil fuel actually to crack water to a large extent as well. So there is a lot of water used in those processes too. But if you actually do the numbers on water usage in most of these processes, and then you compare that to things like how much water we produce through a typical desalination plant, for instance, it's actually not quite as significant as you might imagine. Nine litres of water sounds like a lot for a kilo of hydrogen, but actually, if you do the numbers, it's not huge compared to industrial uses of water more broadly in things like the minerals industry. That's not to say it's going to work everywhere. In places where you are water constrained, there's going to have to be some trade-offs there. But in principle, it's doable.
So the other two questions probably lend themselves to be almost joined. One was, why do we even need to use gas and coal to produce hydrogen rather than just splitting water? And the next one is around the amount of water with renewable based hydrogen.
Yeah, so that was the amount of water was for renewable. The hydrogen was around about that 9 kilo mark, 9 litres per kilo, which is 9 kilos of water as well. I guess in answer to the first question, and I was actually was trying to do this calculation to show you, and I haven't quite got it finished yet. So for my next presentation, I'll be able to do it. But the challenge with renewable energy is you need a lot of renewable energy in order to produce hydrogen at scale. And that's not to say that we're not going to do it, but it is going to take a while to get some of those projects built. I mean, we're talking, for an export industry, you're talking almost terawatts of renewable energy installation that are required to rival, I guess, our fossil fuel experts. So that's not to say that you're not going to do it, but it is going to take time to get up to that scale. And so I guess we see the fossil fuel with carbon capture and storage pathway, which is going to abate, somewhere in the vicinity of 90 to 95% of those emissions. If you use that carbon capture and storage, and that's necessary if you're going to pursue that pathway. So we would certainly see that those fossil fuel pathways with CCS as being a way of scaling up fairly rapidly while we're building that renewable energy supply, building it out. We're still in the phase with renewable energy where we're trying to decarbonize our electricity system, let alone anything else. So all of these things take time. And we're really rushing, I guess, over the next decade to try and get these projects built and get that hydrogen supply happening, because many other countries are looking at it too.
Okay, so there's a couple of others that are coming through. I'm trying to keep up with them here. Is the Toyota vehicle an electric vehicle with a hydrogen fuel cell? Absolutely, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, so it drives exactly like an electric vehicle, but the thing about the fuel cell vehicles is they have a much smaller battery, because you're essentially replenishing them using the hydrogen fuel cell to generate the electricity that goes into that battery. So you have a hydrogen tank, you have a hydrogen fuel cell, and you have a battery, and basically you interplay the electricity that comes out of the fuel cell to supply the battery for storing, or you can actually, I discovered this only the other day when we were actually looking at the car, the fuel cell does actually power the electric motor directly in various times as well. Okay, now here's another sort of technical one. Can existing gas pipelines be used to transport hydrogen? What carbon price is assumed in the need to get to 2 kilos of hydrogen in order for it to be a viable replacement fuel? So there's two.
That was two. Sorry, Amanda, that was $2 a kilo. So that was yep.
Sorry, I might have said something wrong. So yeah, what carbon price is assumed in the need to get to 2 kilos? Sorry, $2 a kilo of hydrogen in order for it to be a viable replacement fuel? So I'll answer that one first. I'll come back to the first one. You can remind me what it was, Amanda, in a minute. But yeah, we don't make any assumptions about carbon prices in setting those targets. They're basically an economic target, and so it's whatever way you can get there is what's required to get just purely to get the price down to that level. So basically, if you can get hydrogen to that sort of price, it's clean hydrogen, that is, then essentially they're economic, they're competitive in those applications. So it's whatever means, be it by new technology, be it by policy means, it's that's just the target. Okay, and the other question was, can existing gas pipelines be used to transport hydrogen? Yeah, great. That's a great question, and that's a big question that the gas industry, as I mentioned, is trying to answer. So the current focus for most of those projects is to introduce 10% natural gas, hydrogen into the natural gas, and that's seen as a level which is perfectly manageable using the existing infrastructure. Things change as you go to higher percentages. So the combustion behaviour, in particular of hydrogen, starts to change, which means you may need to change appliances, for instance, as you go up beyond 20% in particular. So as you go push up, there will be other changes to the infrastructure. The other key aspect is that the materials that the pipelines are made of becomes very important as well, because hydrogen can actually cause material property changes to steel.
and so understanding what that looks like and how you mitigate it is also a focus for that industry. So there are ways you can mitigate that risk, but yeah, and many people now are looking at ways of doing that. But 10% is seen to be pretty easy and pretty accessible, and that's still 10% is still a lot of hydrogen if you think about the entire volume of our gas networks in Australia.
The next one is, how much does a kilo of green hydrogen currently cost as opposed to blue hydrogen?
Yeah, so the current cost of green, I think we estimate is around about $6, $5 to $6 a kilogram, somewhere in that ballpark. So yeah, fair way to go to get that down to 2. That's coming down though. I mean, things are moving since we did our roadmap in 2018. You're starting to see developments and scale up globally of hydrogen production. So as I say, scale and input energy cost are the big determinants of hydrogen costs. So we really expect that to come down as these projects roll out.
And what about the efficiency of generating hydrogen from water and then for energy generation? Does that make sense, or is ammonia a better solution?
Yeah, so I mean, most of those, so electrolysis and fuel cell, so electrolysis takes you from water to hydrogen. That's around about a 50 to 60% energy efficiency process, and it's not dissimilar, maybe a bit higher. It's not dissimilar going the other way. So you are losing energy, or you're using energy at every step. And so you do need a cheap source of energy and an available source of energy to do that, those processes, because they are energy hungry. There's no doubt about it. But of course, renewable energy in particular is you know, if it's cheap enough, is seen as a very economic way of doing that. So yeah, that's the efficiency is important, and new technology that can increase efficiencies, reduce costs, are being developed, you know, very actively all over the world, both in industry and in the research sector. Yeah, that's a key target, I guess. In terms of using ammonia, again, producing ammonia, you have an efficiency, energy efficiency loss as you go from producing ammonia from hydrogen, or from natural gas for that matter. And I forget exactly what the efficiency of that process is, but I'm guessing it's probably of that. I'm going to say around about 60% efficient as well. Don't quote me on that. I'll have to check that. But again, many of these processes typically are in that sort of 60% efficiency ballpark. And so you have to be very conscious of which conversions you go through in order to, why you're doing it, in order to make those decisions. And so ammonia is seen as a good candidate for export, because of course, if you produce ammonia, you can put it on a very much simpler ship than a liquid hydrogen ship, which is the focus of the HESC project, and much easier to move around the world. But the problem is, what are you going to use it for at the other end? Are you going to have to crack the hydrogen back out of it, or are you going to use the ammonia directly in industrial processes? So all of these things are being actively researched, and the technical economics of those processes are being studied very closely to identify where the niches for these different hydrogen and hydrogen derivatives are.
Great. And then just to clarify the answer previously, we talked about $6 a kilo for renewable hydrogen, and there's a target of 2 for blue hydrogen. Is that currently correct?
Yes, that's well, no, both. I mean, the target for hydrogen cost in the government set through the national strategy and low emission technology statement is a target for any hydrogen that's clean. It has to be clean hydrogen, otherwise there's no point in doing it. So that's both fossil fuel with some form of carbon abatement, CCS, or green hydrogen. That's the target. And again, the key point is that at $2 a kilogram, hydrogen becomes very competitive in many applications that are typically currently serviced by fossil fuels without emissions abatement. So it's very much a target to get to, and yeah, we are starting around about that $6 a kilogram production cost, and so there's quite a bit of work to be done over the next 10 years to get those costs down. But we've done quite a bit of modelling on this now, and with scale up. With ongoing reductions in that electricity cost, for instance, we think it's achievable.
And one of the next question was around how much energy can be transported in a cargo of hydrogen versus LNG with current technology. Is that in your knowledge base there, Patrick?
I'm going to go out on a limb again, and I've looked at these numbers previously, but I might recollect them wrongly. But I think roughly, if you look at the energy density, so if you just do an energy for energy comparison between hydrogen and, let's say, liquefied natural gas, it's around about a third the energy, the volume energy density. So basically, you need roughly three ships per ship of LNG to get the same energy moved around the world. That's one way of thinking about it. Again, I'm sure I've got that grossly simplistic, but it's of that order anyway.
Okay, and probably the last question. Let me see here. In order to invest in these types of solutions, like green hydrogen, what do investors normally see? Are there any PPA, or how does the market work?
Yes, well, I think so. People are looking at all manner of different market opportunities, I guess, and that's actually that sort of business model innovation for things like using hydrogen, producing hydrogen from electricity is a big part of the story, actually. So if you look at many of the projects that are being developed all over the country, there's usually some clever arbitraging between energy cost and instantaneous energy cost at a particular moment in time, and the production of hydrogen. So you can think of hydrogen as being a sort of a buffer in some ways between renewable energy production and the electricity markets in particular. So there's a lot of innovation in that space, I think, and figuring out where and how long you might want to produce and store hydrogen in different projects is a big part of the story.
And just to end off here, there's one that I think you'll definitely know the answer of. It's the CSIRO and Swinburne Clayton VH2 Hub project. Are you able to provide a progress update on that at all, Patrick?
I certainly can. Yes, we're just so we were announced. The federal government, the state government funding was announced back in February, and we're building our collaborative projects with Swinburne University. I can tell you that we have finished our tender for our refueler acquisition. So we had my first meeting with the successful tenderers just on Friday, actually, and so we're going ahead with the commissioning, or sorry, not commissioning, the procurement of that system, and I hope to be able to tell you who that is very shortly.
Great. The last two, Jane, there's a couple here around CCS. I think the one has actually been answered in our previous discussions, which was why will the CO2 remain stored under Bass Strait? So the person who asked that, you can actually go and watch the our previous video, why is Gippsland so suitable for CCS, and have your question answered there. And the last one was, does CCS in Gippsland allow for oil and gas extraction from old wells in Bass Strait? Jane, you might want to answer that one.
Sorry, could you repeat that question, Amanda?
Oh, sure. Is oil and gas extraction involved in CCS in Bass Strait?
No, it's not oil and gas. No, I guess we're almost doing in reverse. The oil and gas has been stored for millions of years in geological structures. So we're either using those depleted structures or other structures that have suitable geology and storing the CO2 down in the subsurface. But again, I would recommend for those. Sorry, Patrick, you go.
I'll just add, though, in other places. So depending on the type of natural gas resources you have around the country, many natural gas resources actually have quite a lot of carbon dioxide in them. But that's not true for the Bass Strait resources, but for many others there is quite a lot of CO2, and so there are people actively looking at how you can actually reduce the emissions from the natural gas production process using carbon capture and storage in other states in particular.
Yep, thanks for that add-on, Patrick. And I guess the other thing is that some places use CO2 for EOR, or enhanced oil recovery. So to actually get a better, get all of the remaining little bits of oil that are still stuck within the structures, so using the CO2 to effectively displace them and push them out. So that's quite often in North America, the CO2, the CCS has that EOR as a driver, but in Bass Strait we get really good extraction rates. So enhanced oil recovery, it's not used for that purpose in our particular setting. But all good questions, and like I think Amanda said, for anybody that hasn't had the chance to participate in the other sessions, certainly recommend that you do. They're up on our website. I think we will close it out now. Just checking with Amanda, no more questions?
No, I've left that screen, but I was pretty sure we were at the end of them.
We're at the end.
There doesn't seem to be any sitting there at the moment. If some do pop in, we'll add those to our frequently asked questions, but no, I can confirm no new questions at the moment.
Fantastic. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much, Patrick, for making time to deliver that presentation today. Certainly a moving space. I think it's something that we do need to probably have regular updates on, because I feel the whole hydrogen setting is moving so quickly at so many different levels in so many directions, and this is great to just have that that update of where everything is at. It's thank you to all of our attendees. Thanks. We wouldn't be having them without you tuning in. So thank you very much for making the time to come along and listen. As we've said in the past, you can view all 5 sessions held over May and June by visiting the Earth Resources Victoria website, or you can just, of course, Google the CarbonNet project and we will pop up. We are the only ones called the CarbonNet project, so very easy to find. This was our final online community information session for this series. I'm sure Amanda has got it on her forward program to perhaps run another session later in the year. But in the meantime, can I recommend that you subscribe to the CarbonNet e-newsletter to keep up to date with the project. If you do have any questions, if you wake up at 2 AM and think, gee, I wished I'd asked Patrick this, by all means, shoot it to that email, info@carbonet@ecodev.vic.gov.au, and Amanda will follow up with Patrick. So if there are any questions, but yeah, thanks very much everyone for making the time. Thank you, Patrick. Big thank you to Amanda, who has been the marketer, the producer, done really everything to get these sessions off the ground. She has done a fabulous job. So thanks, Amanda. You've done a fabulous job. And we look forward to, perhaps doing it all again in a few months' time. Thanks very much, everyone. With that, we'll call it to an end. Thank you.